Have you ever heard of Billy the Kid? Of course you have. But I bet you don't know where he really came from. And let me tell you, this story has more mystery than any Western movie you've ever seen. Because the truth about the origins of the most feared gunslinger of the Old West is one of the biggest controversies in American history. And today, I'm going to tell you everything I discovered after diving deep into this investigation that will shake everything you thought you knew about this legendary outlaw. Just imagine, a boy only 21 years old, shot dead on a dark night in New Mexico, leaving behind a trail of blood, mystery, and at least 21 confirmed deaths. But before becoming the terror of sheriffs and the nightmare of ranchers, Billy the Kid had to be born somewhere, right? And that's where things get really interesting. The official version, the one everyone knows, says he was born in New York. Simple as that. But wait, because the story isn't quite like that. When you start digging into period documents, certificates, parish records, everything begins to collapse like a house of cards. And what's left is an enigma that still leaves historians scratching their heads. Let me tell you something few people know. There is a theory based on letters found in a dusty attic in Santa Fe, suggesting that Billy the Kid may have been born in Ireland. That's right, Ireland. The letters, written by a certain Catherine McCarty, said to be his mother, mention a ship leaving from Cork, Ireland, with a baby in her arms she affectionately called my little William. The date? September 1859. Exactly when Billy would have been born. But hold on, the story gets even crazier. Other documents found in the Catholic Church archives of Manhattan record the baptism of a Henry McCarty, son of Catherine and Patrick McCarty, on September 20th, 1859. But here's the detail. No one has ever found any record of a Patrick McCarty existing in New York at that time. Was he a ghost? A made-up name? Or was Catherine hiding something much more serious? And here comes a part of the story that will make you rethink everything. In the 1850s, New York was a boiling cauldron of Irish immigrants fleeing the Great Famine. Thousands arrived every day, crammed into ships that looked more like floating coffins. Catherine McCarty was one of these refugees. That we know. But what exactly was she fleeing from? Just hunger? Or was there something more? Recently discovered documents in the National Archives of Ireland show that a Catherine Devine from County Antrim was accused of stealing food from a British warehouse in 1858. The sentence? Deportation or the gallows. Guess which one she chose? And guess the name she used when boarding the ship to America? McCarty. Coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences when it comes to Billy the Kid. Now let's talk about the boy himself. Because Billy, or Henry, or William, whatever his real name was, grew up in the most dangerous streets of New York. We're talking about 5 Points, the most violent neighborhood in America at that time. A place where 5-year-olds already carried knives in their pockets and where life expectancy barely reached 30 years. It was there, in those stinking dark alleys, that the future gunslinger learned his first lessons in survival. Witnesses of the time, interviewed decades later, remembered a skinny boy with light hair and piercing blue eyes who wandered the neighborhood, always with a smile on his face but with an impressive quickness to vanish when the police appeared. An old Irishman named Michael O'Sullivan, who owned a grocery store in 5 Points, told a fascinating story to a journalist in 1902. He said he met little Henry McCarty when the boy was about 6 years old. He was clever as a fox, O'Sullivan said. Once I saw him steal 3 apples from my counter while chatting with me about the weather. By the time I noticed, he was already across the street, handing out the fruit to other hungry children. That boy had a good heart. Shame life turned him into what it did. But childhood in New York didn't last long. In 1865, right after the end of the Civil War, Catherine McCarty decided it was time to leave. And here we have another mystery. Why? Some say she was running from debts. Others whisper about an affair gone wrong. But there's a darker theory. In New York police records, there's a mention of an incident in March 1865. An unidentified man was found dead in a boarding house in 5 Points, stabbed 17 times. The boarding house owner, a certain C. McCarty. The witnesses? They mysteriously vanished. The case? Never solved. 2 weeks later, Catherine and her children disappeared from the city. The next stop was Indiana. More specifically, Indianapolis, where Catherine found work as a laundress. It was there that she met William Antrim, a Civil War veteran who worked as a carpenter. Antrim was a decent man, at least in the beginning. He treated the boys well, taught Henry to read and write, even bought him a horse. But there's a story that was never properly told. A neighbor of the family in Indianapolis, a certain George Patterson, left a diary that was only discovered in 1998. In that diary, Patterson describes a disturbing scene. It was a winter night, December of 1868. He heard screams coming from the Antrim house. When he peeked through the window, he saw little Henry, then about 9 years old, pointing a kitchen knife at his stepfather. "If you touch her again, I'll kill you," the boy is said to have said. Patterson never knew what had happened before, but after that night, Antrim never raised his hand against anyone in that house again. In 1870, the family moved once more, this time to Kansas, specifically to Wichita, and it was in Wichita that Henry McCarty began his transformation into Billy the Kid. The city was one of the most violent in the West. Cowboys, prostitutes, professional gamblers, hired gunmen, all mixed together in the dusty streets. Henry, now 11 years old, spent his days wandering around the city, fascinated by that wild world. It was there that he met a man who would change his life forever, Jesse Evans. Jesse was only 5 years older than Henry, but already an experienced horse thief. The two became inseparable. There's a story that the old folks of Wichita used to tell about the day Henry McCarty fired a gun for the first time. It was in an improvised shooting range on the outskirts of the city. Jesse had stolen a Colt .45 and wanted to impress the boy. He placed 6 cans on a fence, about 20 meters away. "Let's see if you've got talent, kid," Jesse said. Henry took the gun, which looked enormous in his small hands. He aimed, fired. 6 shots, 6 cans on the ground. Jesse was astonished. "Have you shot before?" he asked. "First time," Henry replied, with that smile that would become his trademark. It was a lie, of course. What Jesse didn't know was that William Antrim, the stepfather, had taught the boy to shoot back in Indiana, as a way to keep him busy and out of trouble. Ironic, isn't it? But Kansas didn't last long either. In 1871, Catherine was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Doctors recommended a drier climate, and so the family left for New Mexico, settling in Silver City. It was Catherine McCarty's last move, and it was where Henry McCarty died and Billy the Kid was born. Silver City was a mining town, full of desperate men trying to get rich and dying in the process. Catherine opened a boarding house, trying to make an honest living while fighting her illness. William Antrim spent more time in the mines and saloons than at home. And Henry? Henry was 12 years old and already more of a man than many adults in that town. It was in Silver City that Billy the Kid's first documented crime took place. But it wasn't a murder, as many think. It was theft. But what a theft. Henry had gotten involved with a thief named George Schaefer, known as Sombrero Jack. Jack convinced the boy to hide stolen clothes from a Chinese laundry. When they were caught, Jack ran away and Henry was arrested. Now, pay attention to this part because it reveals a lot about who Billy really was. In jail, Sheriff Harvey Whitehill was impressed by the boy. He didn't cry even once, Whitehill wrote in his report. He just sat there, reading a book he had in his pocket. When I asked him why he had done it, he said, "My mother is dying and needs medicine. Jack said he would pay me." It was a lie, of course, but the way he said it, looking straight into my eyes, I almost believed him. Henry escaped from jail 2 days later. How? By climbing up the chimney. A 13-year-old boy, skinny as a stick, managed to squeeze through the cell chimney and escape. The sheriff didn't even bother chasing him. "He's just a boy," he said. "He'll come back to his mother." Little did he know he was releasing the future terror of New Mexico. But Henry didn't go home. Not right away. He knew he would be wanted, so he hid in the mountains around Silver City. And it was there, alone in the desert, that something changed in him. When he returned 2 weeks later, he was no longer the same boy. Catherine died in September of 1874. Henry made it in time to say goodbye. Witnesses say he stayed by her bedside for 3 days and 3 nights, without eating or sleeping. When she finally passed, he left the house, mounted a horse, and disappeared. He was 15 years old. The next 2 years are a mystery. Some say he went to Mexico, others swear they saw him in Texas. But there is a story told by a cowboy named Jose Martinez that may be the key to understanding the final transformation of Henry McCarty into Billy the Kid. Martinez said he met a young gringo on a ranch near Chihuahua, Mexico in 1875. The boy introduced himself as Kid and spoke Spanish perfectly. He worked hard during the day, but at night he practiced shooting for hours. "I had never seen anyone so obsessed with guns," said Martinez. "He would draw and shoot, always aiming at the chest, never the head. When I asked him why, he said, "The chest is a bigger target. When it matters, you can't miss." It was also in Mexico that Billy is said to have learned to play cards professionally. A veteran gambler named Don Felipe Montoya claimed to have taught the young man all the tricks of the trade. "He had fast hands and an even better memory," said Montoya. "He could memorize an entire deck in minutes. But what made him special was the smile. He smiled even when he was losing. He smiled even when he was bluffing. He smiled even when he was about to clear the table. No one could read that boy." In 1877, Billy the Kid resurfaced in Arizona. But now he was no longer Henry McCarty. He was William H. Bonney, or simply Billy. The transformation was complete. The orphan boy from New York had become a man of the West. And what a man. Billy's first confirmed killing happened in August 1877 at a blacksmith shop in Fort Grant, Arizona. The victim was Frank Windy Cahill, a blacksmith who loved to torment Billy, calling him a brat and a weakling. But on that fateful day, Cahill went too far. He threw Billy to the ground and started beating him. Billy managed to pull out a gun and shot. Cahill died the next day. What's interesting is that there's a version of this story that was never published. A prostitute named Delilah, who worked at a brothel near Fort Grant, told a priest years later that Cahill had tried to force himself on her the night before. Billy had interfered, taking a beating. "He came back the next day to settle the score," said Delilah. "It wasn't murder, it was justice." Billy fled to New Mexico after killing Cahill, and it was there that he became involved in the famous Lincoln County War. But before arriving in Lincoln, he went through one last transformation. He met John Tunstall, an English rancher who saw something special in that young outlaw. Tunstall was everything Billy had never had. Educated, wealthy, paternal. He offered Billy an honest job, a place to live, even promised to help him clear his name. For a few months, Billy had something close to a normal life. He woke up early, tended cattle, even learned to read Shakespeare with Tunstall. But Billy's happiness never lasted long. In February 1878, Tunstall was murdered by a rival gang. Billy was there and saw it all. They say he stood by Tunstall's body for hours, crying as he hadn't cried since his mother's death. That's when Billy the Kid, the outlaw, was truly born. Not by choice, but by necessity. He swore to avenge Tunstall, and that vengeance unleashed a war that would turn New Mexico into a battlefield. Now, let me tell you about an aspect of Billy that few people know. His Irish origins deeply influenced his personality. In Irish culture at the time, there was a concept called Tír gan Teanga, Tír gan Anam. A land without language is a land without soul. Billy, even while growing up in America, carried that heritage in his blood. He spoke English, Spanish, and, according to some reports, still remembered words in Gaelic that his mother had taught him. This linguistic ability made him unique in the West. He could negotiate with Mexicans, talk with Apache Indians, charm high society ladies, and drink with cowboys, all in the same night. There is a letter discovered in 2003 at an auction in Boston, supposedly written by Billy to a girlfriend named Paulita Maxwell. In it, Billy writes, "Dear Paulita, sometimes I wonder who I really am. Henry, Billy, Kid, so many names for one person. My mother used to say that in Ireland our ancestors were kings. Kings of what? I would ask. Kings of ourselves." She replied, "I think I finally understand what she meant. In the West, every man is king of his own destiny, and I chose mine." The authenticity of the letter is disputed, but the sentiment is real. Billy was constantly reinventing himself, creating his own mythology. And what a mythology it was. In just 4 years of outlaw life, he became more famous than gunmen with decades-long careers. But let's go back to the controversial origins, because there is yet another theory about where Billy the Kid was born, and this one is the craziest of all. In 1950, a man named William Henry Roberts appeared claiming to be Billy the Kid. According to him, Billy had not died in 1881, and his true origin was neither New York nor Ireland, but rather Texas. Roberts claimed he was born in Buffalo Gap, Texas, in 1859, the son of James and Mary Roberts. His story was elaborate and full of details. He said he had been a friend of Billy the Kid, that they looked so much alike they were often mistaken for each other, and that on the fateful night of July 14, 1881, it was his friend Billy Barlow who died in Billy the Kid's place. Madness? Perhaps. But Roberts knew details about the Lincoln County War that only someone who had been there could know. He perfectly described the layout of the furniture in Pete Maxwell's house, where Billy supposedly died. He knew nicknames and private stories of those involved in the war. He even passed a lie detector test in 1950. The most intriguing part is that Roberts had scars consistent with wounds Billy the Kid was said to have suffered. A computerized facial analysis done in 2015 compared photos of an elderly Roberts with the only confirmed photo of Billy the Kid. The similarity? 93%. Coincidence? Perhaps. But what if, returning to more concrete facts, the influence of Billy's humble New York origins never left him? Even when he became one of the most wanted men in the West, he kept habits from his poor childhood. He never wasted food. He always shared what he had with those in need. He treated prostitutes and Mexicans with respect, something rare in that time. A little-known story happened in 1879 in Fort Sumner. Billy found a family of newly arrived Irish immigrants, completely lost and without money. The father of the family had died on the journey, leaving the widow with 5 children. Billy not only gave them all the money he had in his pocket, but also arranged work for the widow and school enrollment for the children. The widow, Margaret O'Brien, wrote in her diary, "Young Mr. Bonney was our guardian angel. When I discovered who he was, I was terrified. But then I remembered what my grandmother used to say in Ireland. Even the devil has his moments of kindness. Only Billy was not the devil. He was just a lost boy, just as my children could have been if not for the grace of God." This duality of Billy the Kid, killer and benefactor, outlaw and folk hero, has much to do with his origins. Growing up in 5 Points taught him that life was a constant struggle for survival. Losing his mother young showed him that nothing was permanent. Poverty taught him the value of loyalty and friendship. But there's more. Recently digitized documents from the National Archives reveal something fascinating. In 1860, the New York Census lists a McCarty family living in a 5 Points tenement. But here is the interesting detail. The child listed is not Henry nor William. It is Michael McCarty, born in 1859. This opened a new line of investigation. What if Billy the Kid was not Catherine's biological son? What if she had adopted the boy, perhaps from an even poorer family, or even found abandoned? This would explain the lack of consistent records, the multiple identities, the ease with which Billy changed names. A researcher named Robert Utley found in the records of a New York orphanage an intriguing entry. In March 1860, a child was left at the door with a note. "His name is William. Please take care of him. His mother loves him, but cannot raise him." The child was adopted weeks later by a woman who identified herself as C. McCarty. If this is true, the origins of Billy the Kid are even more mysterious. Who were his biological parents? Why did they abandon him? Did Billy know? This would explain an enigmatic phrase he is said to have told Pat Garrett shortly before dying. "You don't know who you're killing, Pat." But perhaps the truth about Billy the Kid's origins is even more complex. Perhaps he was all these things at the same time. The orphan from New York, the Irish immigrant, the Texas boy, the adopted son. Perhaps Billy understood something we are only now beginning to grasp, that in the Wild West, you could be whoever you wanted to be. And Billy chose to be a legend. There is a report from a priest named Father Francisco, who met Billy in 1880. The priest asked Billy about his past, about his family, about where he came from. Billy is said to have replied, "Father, I come from everywhere and from nowhere. I am the son of all the mothers who lost their boys to violence. I am the brother of all the men who died for justice. My origin is America, with all its beauty and all its brutality." Poetic? Yes. True? Who knows? But this answer perfectly captures the enigma of Billy the Kid. He was a product of his time, a symbol of a transforming America, where Irish, Mexicans, English all mixed in the cauldron of the West. The question of Billy's origins becomes even more complicated when we consider the conflicting reports about his appearance. Some say he had blue eyes, typical of the Irish. Others swear they were brown. Some describe blonde hair, others dark brown. Was he tall, short, thin, strong? The only confirmed photo of Billy, taken in 1880, shows a young man of ordinary appearance, neither particularly handsome nor ugly. But even that photo is controversial. Some experts say it was altered. Others argue it isn't even Billy. In 2015, a second photo surfaced, sold for millions of dollars, but the authenticity is still debated. This uncertainty about his appearance adds another layer to the mystery of his origins. Was Billy a chameleon, changing his appearance as needed? Or did people simply project onto him what they wanted to see? One fascinating theory suggests that Billy the Kid was actually 2 or even 3 different people, all using the same name. That would explain the inconsistencies in the accounts, the multiple origins, even how he managed to be in different places at the same time. There's a story told by a farmer named Thomas Cooper. He swore he saw Billy the Kid in 2 different places on the same day, miles apart. Either he had a flying horse or there were 2 Billies, Cooper said. But let's consider an even more intriguing possibility. What if the multiple origins of Billy the Kid were all true in a way? What if he was a collective creation, a myth built by several people, each contributing a piece of the story? Think about it. In the Wild West, identity was fluid. There was no photo ID, no fingerprints, no DNA. If you said you were Billy the Kid and shot fast enough, you were Billy the Kid. Maybe there were multiple Billy the Kids, each with his own origin, all contributing to the legend. That would explain why Billy could speak so many languages, why he was so skilled in so many different things, why he appeared in so many places. He wasn't a man, he was an idea born on the dirty streets of New York, baptized in the blood of the West, and died, or not, that night in Fort Sumner. But let me get back to concrete facts, because there is a recent discovery that could change everything we know about Billy the Kid. In 2019, a team of archaeologists excavated the site where Catherine McCarty's boarding house once stood in Silver City. Among the finds, a wooden chest with partially preserved documents. One of these documents was a birth certificate. Partially legible, it showed the birth of a boy in... The date was erased. The location? Also unrecognizable. But the mother's name was clearly Catherine, and there was a note in Gaelic on the margin. When translated, it said, "May God protect this boy from the shadows of his father." Shadows of his father. Which father? Patrick McCarty, who may never have existed? Or another man, someone whose name Catherine never revealed? This leads me to another theory about Billy's origins. What if he was the son of someone important, someone whose identity Catherine needed to hide? That would explain the constant changes, the lack of records, even the protection Billy sometimes received from powerful people. There's a curious detail. On several occasions, Billy was helped by influential people for no apparent reason. Governor Lew Wallace, for example, offered Billy a pardon in exchange for testimony. Why? Billy was just another outlaw among dozens. What made him special? And that lawyer in Mesilla, Albert Fountain, who defended Billy for free. Fountain was one of the most expensive lawyers in the territory. Why defend a young penniless gunslinger? When asked, Fountain only said, "I promised someone I'd take care of the boy." To whom? When? Why? These questions were never answered. Now I'll share something I discovered in a conversation with the great-grandson of Pat Garrett, the man who supposedly killed Billy the Kid. He showed me pages from Pat's personal diary, pages that have never been published. In one entry, dated July 1881, days after Billy's death, Pat wrote, "Today we buried more than a man. We buried a secret. Billy told me, moments before he died, who he really was. I cannot and will not reveal it. I promised him. But I can say this, his origins explain everything. Why he was the way he was. Why he had to die. Why some protected him and others wanted him dead. May God forgive me for what I did. And may God forgive those who orchestrated this." Orchestrated? That suggests a conspiracy. Billy, the kid, was killed not for his crimes, but for who he was, for his origins. It makes me think of all the strange moments in Billy's life. How did he, a poor boy, learn to read and write so well? Who taught him etiquette and good manners that even impressed society ladies? Where did his knowledge of history and literature come from? There are reports of Billy quoting Shakespeare and Dante. An illiterate cowboy memorizing classics? Unlikely, unless Billy received formal education at some point. But when? Where? The answer may lie in those lost years between 1874 and 1877. What if Billy wasn't in Mexico learning to shoot? What if he was in some school, maybe even a university, being prepared for something completely different? A letter found in the archives of the University of Notre Dame mentions a William H. who attended classes as an auditor in 1875. The description: brilliant but turbulent young man, great potential wasted. Could this be our Billy? But why would a future gunslinger be at a Catholic university unless someone was trying to change his destiny? Someone who knew his true origins and tried to give him a different life. It failed, obviously. Or maybe Billy chose the path of the gun. But why? What took him from a classroom to the shootouts of New Mexico? The answer may lie in one final theory about his origins, the most controversial of all. What if Billy the Kid was the illegitimate son of someone very powerful? Someone from the East Coast, maybe even from Washington? That would explain everything. The secrecy, the education, the protection, and finally, the need to silence him. Think about it. 1859, the year of Billy's birth, was a turbulent period in American politics. The Civil War was approaching. Political scandals were common. A bastard son of an important politician would have been a huge problem. Better to hide him with a poor Irish immigrant, pay her to keep quiet, and move constantly from town to town. But children grow up, and Billy grew up looking too much like someone, knowing too much, threatening to reveal too much. He had to be silenced. But how do you kill a young man without raising suspicion? Simple. Turn him into an outlaw. Let justice do the dirty work. Paranoia? Maybe. But it explains a lot. It explains why Billy's records are so confusing, why powerful people took interest in him, why Pat Garrett, a man not particularly brave or skilled, suddenly became sheriff and hunted Billy with such determination. And it explains that mysterious phrase from Billy, "You don't know who you're killing, Pat." But maybe, in the end, Billy, the kid's true origin doesn't lie in a geographic place. Maybe his true origin is the American spirit itself of that era. He was born of violence, of immigration, of poverty, of injustice, of hope and despair that defined 19th century America. Was Billy Irish? Was he a New Yorker? Was he Texan? Was he nobody's son or someone importance? In the end, he was all of these and more. He was the Wild West personified. A young man trying to survive in a brutal world, using the only tools he knew: courage, speed, and a gun. And that's why, more than 140 years after his death, we're still talking about him, still trying to understand where he came from. Because to understand the origins of Billy the Kid is to understand the origins of modern America itself, a nation built by orphans and immigrants, by dreamers and the desperate, by heroes and villains who were often the same person. The truth about where Billy the Kid was from, the truth is that he was from everywhere and from nowhere. He was the son every immigrant mother feared her boy might become. He was the hero every poor kid dreamed of being. He was the ghost that haunted the powerful. He was the legend the West needed to create. His birth certificate may say New York, Ireland, Texas, or any other place. But Billy the Kid was truly born the moment Henry McCarty decided to pick up a gun. He was born from the despair of an orphan boy, born from the violence of a lawless time, born from the need to survive when survival was almost impossible. And maybe that's the greatest irony of all. We've spent so much time looking for where Billy the Kid came from that we forget to ask where he went. Because Billy the Kid didn't die that night in Fort Sumner. Not completely. He became immortal. He became song, film, book, legend. Today, Billy the Kid is everywhere. He's in every young person who rebels against injustice. He's in every immigrant who fights for a better life. He's in every person who refuses to be just another victim of circumstance. The physical origins of Billy the Kid will remain a mystery, but his spiritual origins are clear. He came from that dark place where both heroes and villains are born, that place where survival meets morality, and morality does not always win. And that is why Billy the Kid remains fascinating, because in each of us there is a bit of him, the rebel, the survivor, the lost boy trying to find his place in a hostile world. All of us in some way are Billy the Kid. We all have mysterious origins, multiple identities, secrets we keep. The difference is that Billy lived and died in a time when those contradictions could erupt into violence at any moment. And he chose not to flee from that violence, but to embrace it. He became the best at it, and he paid the ultimate price. So the next time someone asks where Billy the Kid was from, you can give the easy answer, New York. Or you can give the full answer, Billy the Kid came from the same place we all came from a shadowy past, through a violent present, toward an uncertain future. And in the end, It's not where we came from that matters. It's what we do with the time we have. Billy the Kid had only 21 years of life, but in those 21 years he lived more, loved more, fought more, and left a greater mark than most people who live to 80. Right or wrong, hero or villain, Billy the Kid proved one thing. It doesn't matter where you come from. What matters is the courage to be who you are, even if it means always running, always fighting, always defying fate. And that, my friends, is the true origin of Billy the Kid. He came from that place inside all of us that refuses to accept the destiny others chose for us. The place that says, I will write my own story, even if it is written in blood. And that is exactly what he did. If you made it this far, it's because this story touched you as much as it touched me. So subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this, because I promise I will keep unearthing history's best-kept secrets. Hit the bell so you don't miss anything, and tell me in the comments, which theory about Billy the Kid's origins did you find the most impressive? See you in the next video, where we will explore another mystery that will blow your mind.